what Zelenskyy said yesterday before the world, well, mostly before the United States. You know, he addressed the German parliament this morning, just a short while ago. And I don't know if he made the same sales pitch. I wasn't able to watch his address to the German parliament, but we live in an era right now where democracies, since, around the middle of the Bush regime, the Bush administration, of course, really gave democracies a black eye. You had arguably the majority of Americans saying we should not invade a country that had nothing to do with 9/11, had no weapons of mass destruction, and was just basically minding its own business, Iraq. And yet Bush did it anyway and talked 48 other nations into supporting him and 3 other nations into actually providing weapons for that. And it really damaged democracy all around the world. Freedom House noted that, the present threat to democracy, they say, is the product of 16 consecutive years of decline in global freedom. This goes back to when, Bush declared his war in Iraq. And they note a total of 60 countries suffered declines over the past year, while only 25 improved. As of today, some 38% of the global population live in not free countries, the highest proportion since 1997. Only about 20% now live in free countries. So what Zelenskyy said to the American Congress, well, I'll read it to you. This is what he said. He said, quote, "Russia has attacked not just us, not just our land, not just our cities. It went on a brutal offensive against our values, basic human values. It threw tanks and planes against our freedom, against our right to live freely in our own country, choosing our own future." Now, as you know, and as I talked about at some length last week, the Budapest Memorandum was supposed to protect Ukraine. Ukraine was the 4th largest nuclear power in the world in 1994. When they signed this agreement with Russia and the United Kingdom and the United States, Bill Clinton signed it, that promised that Ukraine's borders would never be violated if they simply gave up those 1,900 nukes, most of which were pointed at the United States. They did. They gave them up. The president of Ukraine signed the document, and then we ignored it. So Zelenskyy is, kind of coming to the table saying, hey, what about us? We gave up all this stuff at your, based on your promise. And it doesn't look like the world can do anything about a madman dictator trying to destroy a democratic country. It reminded me so much when I listened to his speech of Franklin Roosevelt's speech from December 29, 1940, almost exactly a year before we entered World War II, where FDR came out and basically said, we need to start making weapons, and we need to start lending them. Remember Lend-Lease? I mean, you don't remember, probably you're not old enough, but that's what it was, lending them to Great Britain because they were under constant bombardment by the Nazis. And FDR said, the experience of the past 2 years has proven beyond a doubt that no nation can appease the Nazis. No man can tame a tiger into a kitten by stroking it. There can be no appeasement with ruthlessness. There can be no reasoning with an incendiary bomb. We know now that a nation can have peace with the Nazis only at the price of total surrender. And then he also said, let's be clear about this, my friends. He said, but we well know that we cannot escape danger or the fear of it by crawling into bed and pulling the covers over our heads. And then he goes on to say that the history of recent years proves that the shootings and chains and concentration camps are not simply the transient tools, but the very altars of modern dictatorship. They may talk of a new world order, but what they have in mind is but a revival of the oldest and the worst, tyranny. In that there is no liberty, no religion, no hope. So at that time, the League of Nations had died. The United Nations had not yet been birthed. There was no international agency. And FDR wrapped up that December 29, 1940 speech by saying that America must become, quoting him, the great arsenal of democracy. In fact, that's typically what they call that speech, was the arsenal of democracy speech. But now, I mean, who is going to do this? How does this happen? Well, this is where Zelenskyy came in. Now, before anybody goes nuts about this, let me be very clear. I'm not agreeing with Zelenskyy on this. What I am saying is he has opened the door to a conversation that I think we in the United States and the world need to have. I don't think that the military solution he proposes is the right way to go, and I'll tell you why. But I do think that we need to do something. And I don't know what it is. I have a couple of ideas. You know, some people have been posting suggestions on Twitter. I'll get to that in just a minute. But this is what Zelenskyy said in his speech yesterday before the U.S. Congress. He said, we need to create new tools to respond quickly and stop the war, the full-scale Russian invasion of Ukraine, which began on February 24th. Today, the world does not have such tools. The war of the past have prompted our predecessors to create institutions that should protect us from war, but they unfortunately don't work. We see it, you see it, so we need new ones, new institutions, new alliances, and we offer them. And this is what Zelenskyy laid out. He said we need a new international agency like the United Nations, only he wants to call it the U-24. Why U-24? Well, U for United, 24 because it means that within 24 hours, this agency will be able to stop any country that attacks a non-belligerent country, any country that just attacks another country. He said, we propose to create an association, U-24, United for Peace, a union of responsible countries that have the strength and consciousness to stop conflicts immediately, provide all the necessary assistance in 24 hours if necessary, even weapons if necessary, sanctions, humanitarian support, political support, finances, everything you need to keep the peace and quickly save the world and save lives. Now, he went on to say this association could also deal with natural disasters. It could be kind of a rapid response force. And then he wrapped it up by saying, ladies and gentlemen, Americans, if such alliance would exist today, that is U-24, we would be able to save thousands of lives in our country, in many countries in the world, those who need peace, those who suffer inhumane destruction. Now, nobody can accuse Zelenskyy of not thinking big, right? Basically, we need he's saying we need a United Nations with weapons. Well, the United Nations was very careful not to have weapons. They have a peacekeeping force, but even that came, a little ways down the road and very reluctantly. NATO is the only multinational military force, and NATO only protects their own countries. And my concern about this, and I'll say this right up front, the reason why I think it's a bad idea what Zelenskyy is proposing is, the old Lord Acton quote, absolute power corrupts absolutely. If there is a single world organization that is that is so powerful that it can stop the United States or stop Russia, keep in mind, we lied our way into a war in Iraq, which was illegal, not to mention Vietnam. And more people died in Iraq and Vietnam than have died in Ukraine so far. So, this would have to be an agency that could restrain George W. Bush and Dick Cheney, as well as Vladimir Putin. And my concern is that any agency that large, well, just keep in mind, Adolf Hitler's sales pitch to his people was that he was going to create 1,000 years of peace. Just put us in charge of the world, Hitler said, and we will bring peace to the world. It reminds me of, I think it was Tacitus, in Tacitus and Agricola, who said, they make the world a desert and they call it peace. Well, I don't think that's going to work. I mean, that was the Nazi suggestion. And not to say that Zelensky's a Nazi or anything close to that, but that's why I say we need to be careful. But on the other hand, there might be some other things we can do. I mean, perhaps the solution is to expand the International Court of Justice, to give them the authority to actually seize, prosecute, and punish in real time any nation's leaders who drag their countries into illegal war. I mean, that court just day before yesterday declared Putin, basically a war criminal, his war illegal, and ordered the war to stop. But they have no teeth. They have no enforcement mechanism. Perhaps there's another way altogether that we haven't even thought of. And so I toss this out to you. What say you? What do you think is possible? I've noticed on Twitter that there have been a number of suggestions that I thought were interesting. Another one's Anti-Gaslight Initiative says whether or not it could keep world peace, the world should have a world organization of democracies that only countries with true democracy can join. The U.S. system would have to go through major reforms to qualify. All true democracies should shame all other countries with this. Michael Wyckoff says it's a good idea, but how does a global peace agency deal with the problem of a rogue leader? Excellent questions. Like I said, I don't have answers here, but I do think we should be talking about it, and our media isn't.